Hey, everybody. Presumably, I'm live. I can see you talking, so that's a good sign. Those of you who know me know that I do not know how this live thing ever works. So tell me if you can hear me. That's number one. I see that there's bars, but tell me, sometimes it's a little low. The levels are low, so let me know if you can actually hear anything or whether I need to gain up. Hearing, hear. Good. Huzzah, huzzah. Ryan says it's a bit low. Well, turn it up then, Ryan. It's always a bit low here because if I go higher, I'll probably peak. You know, for an audio guy, I really don't know how to make this live thing work. I really need an engineer. But who has money for that? Not I can assure you. So it's just me. Okay, well, there's a bunch of you here. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me. This is a Q&A live chat for me, myself, and I. Ostensibly, the focus of the chat will be about my role-playing game, The Broken Empires, which goes into Kickstarter in exactly 1 month, October the 1st, exactly 1 month from today. So that's, ooh, how exciting. That's very exciting. But also, we're going to talk about anything else, too. We're just going to talk about whatever you want to talk about. We're going to talk about RPGs in general, or solo stuff, or whatever you want. It's all gear. It's all gear? It's all gear. All of the stuff I'm using to talk to you is all gear. Okay, all right. So I want to start, before I start taking your questions, by just touching on something briefly. Obviously, I'm assuming everybody who is here knows that I'm kickstarting my own role-playing game, The Broken Empires RPG, on October the 1st. Go to play.thebrokenempire.com. I think it's scrolling, yes, it's scrolling underneath or along the screen. To sign up as a VIP to get in early to get all kinds of special goodies when we launch. So that's cool, and it's taken up all of my life. It's taken up every waking moment. I literally wake up, I bolt up at 3 a.m. going, I need to make sure that the combat modifiers for prone are different. And then I go and I open up the laptop and so that has been my life. That is the reason why the regular episodes of the show haven't been as regular, because literally every day I am working on this game every waking hour. It's crazy, but it's all good. So that's not what I wanted to talk about. What I want to talk about is the notion of the perfect game. I've been running games, playing games for over 40 years, since I was a little kid. And since that time, every time I ran a game, I would always do what I'm sure a lot of you do, which is house rule it, which is say, yeah, this game would just be great if it did this as well, or instead. And so you tinker with it, you house rule it, and you do little things to make it your own, and you're always kind of trying to move towards the perfect game. And then as time goes on, and you play more games, and you run more games, and you start to see all these different elements of all these games that you really like, you start to think, what if I could put them together in one giant super form and put them together like a Frankenstein monster and say it's alive? And so some of us try that, and invariably it fails. And the reason why it fails is because there's no such thing as the perfect game. A lot of people say to me, hey, now that you're making the Broken Empires, is this the only game you're ever going to run? Hell no. Are you out of your mind? If I could take every aspect of every game that I love and put it into one game, it would be an unholy mess, because some things just don't work well together. And that's okay. I've done my best to take all of the things that I like and put them together into the game. But some things had to go because they just do not work with other things. All of this to say, there is no such thing as a perfect game. I would say that my favorite game of all time, and that is a very hard question to answer because that is more of a list than one title. But if I had to pick one, it would probably be a very house-ruled version of Hardmaster 3rd Edition. And even that game has lots of problems for me that I can't fix, because if I try and fix them with elements of other games, it's square peg round hole stuff. It just doesn't work. For those of you who know Mythras or RuneQuest 6, big fan of Mythras. Mythras has a huge influence on the Broken Empires. But when I first started playing Mythras, I was like, oh, I want to take these special effects and be able to put them into Hardmaster. And that looks like it should be super easy. Yeah, not so much. I spent 2 years trying to make that work. Couldn't do it. So the perfect game does not exist, my friend. So when people ask me, so the Broken Emperor is the perfect game? No, it's not the perfect game. I'm trying to get it as close as possible to being the perfect game for me, but that'll never happen either, because even I will house rule my own games. One of the funniest things I ever saw, and maybe some of you guys have seen this, years ago, there was a video by Luke Crane of Burning Wheel fame. For those of you who know Burning Wheel, it's a lot of rules, a lot of little subsections, and a lot of little things you can do to make the game all cool. And there's a video, what I think is a famous video, of Luke running a game at, I think, a con somewhere. And it's a con game, it's a demo game. But even he is skipping over all of his complex rules. And it just makes me think it's so funny, we come up with these beautiful, wonderful ways of doing things, and then we get to the table and go, yeah, that doesn't work. Just I don't know, just roll a d20, get high. It's just hilarious to me. Anyway, no such thing as a perfect game, but I do endeavor to make as good a game as possible. I will say that the Broken Empires does take all of the best concepts from all of my favorite games and puts them together. Not all of them. There's things like, I love the base building rules in Forbidden Lands. I love it. And I wanted to put the base building rules in the Broken Empires, but it's not gonna work. It's not gonna work this time. Hopefully a supplement coming up next. If this goes, if people dig the game and they want to see more, that's certainly something I'm going to work on. But it just doesn't work in the main book. Not because the rules are incompatible, just because there's no time or space in the main book as it is for that. But so I do take most of the concepts of these games that I love and try and put them together and make them work together. And so far, it's pretty cool. Every day things change. Every day the rules change. Not huge, giant, sweeping changes, but every day as we test, as we tinker, as we, relook at things, things get adjusted. So it's funny. We're in the middle of a playtest right now that a friend of mine is running, and I'm in it. I'm playing my own game. That's terrifying. But in that game, he's like, "Oh, okay, so we're going to use last Wednesday's version of the rules." I'm like, "Are you kidding? Those are hopelessly out of date." I've got to give you the one from 10 o'clock this morning. That's the one that you need to use. So, anyway, let's get on with some comments and questions here. James Wood, I believe James. Correct me if I'm wrong. You were the one that helped me with the titles for season 4, were you not? I have a lot of patrons and friends and fans that have similar names. I just want to make sure I've got the right James Wood. In any event, thank you for that. If I haven't said that already. But you do say, I hope you're fully recovered after your Gen Con trip. I hear everyone got sick. Yeah, as far as I know, everyone, well, not everyone, but there was a lot of us YouTuber types that came away with a case of COVID. It was nothing for me. I've had COVID 3 times. It's been cold-vid for me. It's been like minor cold. This time it was like a cold. It was a minor cold that lasted for a week. I was a little more tired than I would be normally, but other than that, it was no big deal. Nonetheless, I appreciate the sentiment. Everything's fine, back, recovered, all is well. Okay, well, let's start here. I do have some YouTube channel members and patrons on here, so I'm going to try and get to them as best I can. I'd like to ensure that I answer all of your questions because you guys are paying for the privilege. But the first one I see is from Christopher Stevenson. Do you believe the game industry has progressed since the 1980s? Oh yeah. I mean, I guess that depends what you mean, but I would say absolutely. I mean, yeah, I guess it depends what you mean. The game industry, has it progressed? Or because game mechanics certainly have progressed. The quality of game mechanics that exist now, let's face it, they blow the 80s games out of the water. And I love those 80s games, don't get me wrong, a lot of them. But in terms of the innovations that have happened in game mechanics over the past few years, it's amazing. It's amazing, the stuff that's happened. In terms of the industry, I can't really speak to the industry. I was never in the industry. I'm still not in the industry. I'm just some guy making a game on Kickstarter. I think Kelsey Dion would be a better person to ask, so maybe I'll ask her that in terms of the state of the industry. But, I mean, obviously the answer on the surface is yes. WotC is in control, whereas before it was TSR. That was the big elephant in the room, right? WotC is owned by Hasbro, whereas TSR was owned by itself, right, for the first while anyway. So that has obviously caused a lot of controversy. I mean, we all know the WotC controversies over the past couple of years. that's an industry thing. That is a big corporation trying to do a thing that causes problems and yada yada yada. But so yes, it has changed. Yeah. All right. Let me see if I can see. Miker Dude, I agree that no game is perfect and needs flexibility at the table to suit the situation. Yeah, absolutely. That is the advantage, really, to a rules light game. You know, you've heard the phrase "rulings over rules," right? These are very, not necessarily rules light, but they're games that are structured to be very, very flexible, very fluid in their play. That is the advantage to them because with a rules light game, you can, if the player says, "Well, I want to leap off the balcony and grab the chandelier and swing at the bad guy." In a rules light game, you can say, "Sure, sounds great. Make a dexterity check." Or if you're Professor Dungeon Master, I don't know, roll 14 or higher on a d20 and you get what you want, right? But in a more rules heavy game, there might be a rule for that. The Broken Empires is not Pathfinder. Let me be very clear. The Broken Empires is simulation light, sim light, which means that it falls more on the rules heavy side of things, but it's not trying to provide a rule for every possible situation. For one thing, that's impossible to do. For another thing, that creates a tome in which you require a PhD in order to master. That's one of the big turnoffs for Pathfinder 2 for me, is that there's so many rules. It's like, oh, there's a rule for walking and chewing gum. Oh, well, that's 2 action points. Um, rules like games tend to be a little more fluid and flexible that way. That is the inherent advantage of them. The fact is, the more rules you have to govern a situation, the fewer situations can be interpreted as broadly, right? It's just the way it is. As I've often said, every game exists on, well, several spectrums, but the one I always talk about is detail of resolution versus speed of play, right? There's really, really fast playing games that have few rules. Or I shouldn't say few rules. They have low resolution detail, right? I hit for 5 hit points. He's at 0. Okay, he's dead. Versus detail of resolution. I swing my sword, beat his defense, circumvent his shield, slash him in the left knee, and now he falls prone in front of me, and now I have an advantage over him, and maybe I'll compel a surrender. That's detail of resolution, but as soon as you move towards one, you move away from the other. So the more detail you have, the slower the game is, and the faster the game is, the less detail you have, and my game is trying to find what I consider a perfect happy medium in the middle there, but, we'll see what we can do. Paul C. with the little tip. Thank you very much. A guess on how many episodes in the current season. Oh, yeah. Season 4 right now is at episode 9. I never actually know. I can tell you this season's going to be shorter, probably, than all of them. Originally, I thought, it's going to be 8 episodes. Well, I've already blown that because we're in episode 9. We are kind of moving towards a resolution, although I don't think it's going to turn out the way I think it is, because it never does. Things are always randomly determined at the table, so we'll see. So I don't know. If I had to guess a number, I'd say 14, but I could be completely wrong. Northeastern Brewmaster, oh, thank you very much. Love your content. Appreciate you, Trevor. Well, I appreciate your support. Thank you so much. Let's scroll up here and see what else we've got. Asgi Lame, what would you say is the theme or core of the Broken Empires? Hard choices. It is a game about hard choices. It's a game about not doing the right thing, because that's an issue of morality, and morality is based on the particular character that you wish to play. But it is about hard choices. Everything in the game is keyed towards that. I'm not going to lie. It is a hard game to play, as in, this is not D&D 5e. You are not playing superheroes. You are not playing people with all these incredible powers that can cut through hordes of minions no. There's no classes. There's no levels. You are a person, and you're a person who's guided by your goals and your personality traits and your skills. So it is a game about hard choices, and it's a game about suffering. And how you rise to the occasion, and how you rise to overcome the obstacles in your way to get what you want. That's the theme of the game, right? But it is an open sandbox game, and it's a big world. So within that framework, you can have all kinds of adventures and quote unquote stories happen. So it's big. There's a lot of opportunities for things there. I always get lost in the comments here, so I'm going to see if I can keep up as best I can, but I'm going to promise right now that I'm going to fail at that. All right, here we are. Ricardo Mazzetto. Hey, Trev, you call it a dramatic fantasy role-playing game. Does it have specific rules for drama? Well, that depends what you mean by drama. What I mean by drama is conflict. Drama means specifically conflict. And I've said this before, but it's well worth stating again. Any medium of drama, any medium, whether that is a play, a movie, a TV show, a role-playing game, falls flat on its face if the characters within that medium do not want anything and are not challenged by anything to get what they want. That is the essence of all drama, and that's all I mean. When I'm talking about a dramatic role-playing game, what I'm talking about is, yes, there are social encounters. Yes, there are more ways to skin a cat than just combat. This is not a dungeon crawler game, although you could crawl through a dungeon with it. What I'm talking about is it is a game about characters who are pursuing goals and have to overcome obstacles in order to achieve those goals. And in order to do that, they've got to use their skills and roll dice, specifically, right? That's what I mean by dramatic, because the more obstacles in the way of the character, the more they have to rise to the occasion, the more inherent drama happens, right? So that's what I mean by that. Vortec Games! Hello, my friend. I recently soloed a Delta Green game. Love the system, and I know some of these concepts are in the Broken Empires. I love Delta Green too. Fantastic game. Really brutal. When I run that game, it is super, super serious. Like, I'm a very kind of jovial, joke-cracking guy. Some of the times, not all the time. I don't like to break the mood unless it's, the joke absolutely needs to be made. But in Delta Green, my players are like, oh, no, nobody jokes. Yeah. It's deadly serious all the time, and it's really stressful, but in the best possible way. Delta Green, for me, there's two huge things I took from Delta Green, or was inspired by Delta Green. One was the blackjack system. Delta Green wasn't the first game to use the blackjack system, but it was the first one that used the blackjack system with percentile games, percentile dice that I've seen. And all that means is you have a skill, you want to roll under that skill, but high. The higher you get, the better you do. That is a fundamental shift from a lot of D100 games. A lot of D100 games, you want to roll under your skill and roll low, right? The lower you roll, the best you do. But in Delta Green, no. It's high. You want high. And that is a huge aspect of my core engine. The other thing that Delta Green did, which I love this, and I've completely implemented this idea, is that you don't always have to roll. If there's a situation, and this is typical with like investigative scenarios or lore scenarios or things like this, where the characters are trying to remember something or something like that. Let's say that the characters are trying to investigate some piece of ancient history, let's say. And the character says, well, I have an ancient lore skill of 60. Can I roll on that? Well, very often the GM will say, you've got it at 60? You don't have to roll. Here's what you know, just by virtue of knowing that. Now, the character can roll, because you can roll and get more success levels to get, more than just the base information. But of course, there's consequences to rolling and failing. Typically, in a situation like that, it would be like time. It takes too much time, but it depends on the context. But the idea that you can cut down on the amount of rolls just by saying, in the adventure scenario, if the character has ancient lore at 40, they know this. If they have it at 60, they know this. If they roll for every 3 success levels, they know this and this and this. I just love that. So I kind of took that and rebranded it and twisted it up to work in my game. It's a great game, Delta Green. All right. Let's see here. Let me get down to some other folks. Wow, lots of questions here, guys. I'll try and get to all of them. Rollboo. All games have specific focus: heroic action, gritty survival, cosmic horror, etc. What is your focus with the Broken Empires? It's not heroic fantasy. Because when people hear heroic fantasy, I think that they think D&D. I think they think super heroic fantasy. But in my game, the word hero has a very specific definition. A hero is made by the actions they take and the choices they make. They're defined by the actions they take, not by the gear they have, or not by the special abilities they have. So heroic just means these are people that are pursuing their goals and are up against some serious stuff. So in that sense, yes, it is a heroic game. But it's not gritty survival. I mean, there are rules for survivalist-based stuff, but it's not like it's not specifically a hex-crawling survival game like something like Forbidden Lands is. There are aspects of that, but it's not specifically about that. Like in this game, you're typically, there's rules to do this, but you're typically not worried about we're in the wilderness. We're moving 2 hexes this day. We have to make sure we have enough food for this day. And now we roll the random and like very standard hex crawly stuff. You can do that. Again, I have optional rules to play the game that way, but that's not really the focus of it. Unless you want it to be. That's the thing about the game. Like, the focus of the game is entirely based on what the characters are. That's up to the GM to provide obstacles for the characters to overcome based on their goals. So in terms of the theme of the game, it's sort of all of these things and nothing. Like, you ask if it's cosmic horror. No, not explicitly, but there's cosmic horror elements to it. And if you want to run a cosmic horror game in the Broken Empires, you can. Some would say that one of those sums would be me, that there was cosmic horror aspects of season 3. Because when Edbert met Urazvath was sort of this weird, otherworldly sorcerer brain with tentacles in a vat. Very Michael Moorcock. And so that kind of leans into some weird cosmic horror stuff as well. But again, it's you can design or you can tailor the game to provide whatever experience you want based on what the goals of the characters are, right? Okay, let's see what we're going here. Where we're going. Okay, I'm losing my place here. Vortec, will there be special editions or cool extras for Kickstarter backers only? Yes, there will. Part of the VIP thing that you sign up for at play.thebrokenempires.com, it gets you a couple things you can only get as a VIP. And then there'll be stuff in the Kickstarter you'll only be able to get as part of the Kickstarter. I know there's a lot of Kickstarters out there that say that, and then a year later they start selling the stuff, but that's not the intention here. We're gonna keep it very exclusive for the Kickstarter backers, and that'll be explicit on the Kickstarter page. You'll see exactly what stuff that is. That is the plan. Okay. James, will you have a starter set for the Broken Empires? Yes, absolutely. In fact, one of the main tiers gives you a hardback copy of the book as well as a box starter set that has pre-gen characters, that has an adventure in it, that has dice in it, that has tokens in it, that has maps in it, terrain maps as well. Zoned and unzoned maps. I am a big fan of the starter set because it harkens back to the days like with my original D&D basic set, not the Mensa, the Moldvay, the Moldvay set, the pink box with the Arrow Lotus cover on it. I have fond memories of that, so, trying to emulate that kind of feel, not with the Arrow Lotus art. Not that there's anything wrong, I love Arrow Lotus art, but yes, there will be a box set, and again, that'll all be clear on the Kickstarter page once it goes live, which is happening soonish, because like I said, we launch in a month from today, so that's pretty cool. JW. Do you have a goal in mind for how long a game goes, or is it completely open? That would be... Are you asking me as a GM for my table, or are you asking me as a designer of the game? I can tell you that as a designer of the game, that's completely up to the GM and the table, right? So the game is ostensibly not based around pre-packaged adventures. Although, again, there will be prepackaged adventures, but the game is really designed for GMs who like to create scenarios based on their characters' goals and like to kind of improvise from random tables and things like this as they go. Again, that's not to say that there aren't prepackaged adventures or scenarios, because there are. But the game is based on... The game presents as something that I, in a manner in which I run my games. And I run my games like that. And if I do use a prepackaged adventure, I'm going to tear it apart and always try and make it relatable to my character's goals at that time to make it more personalized. That's just how I run things, so that's how the game is going to come across. Okay. Oh my, so much. Oh, I'm just overwhelmed. I'm overwhelmed. Okay. Where are we here? The Freeman, when will you be moving on to sci-fi? Well, I just did the 5 parsecs from home thing last year. That was a big thing. I will get back to sci-fi at some point, but fantasy right now is the focus, obviously, because of the game and season 4. But there's lots of sci-fi stuff I want to do. I'm not a huge sci-fi guy. I'm way more of a fantasy guy than sci-fi, but I do enjoy it, and I love the hell out of the 5 Parsecs campaign. That was fun. Garth Jones, how do you think the game will scale from solo and 1 to 2 to 1, 1 to 1 to larger groups, or 5 to 6 players? We haven't figured out the solo rules yet. I have some very, very, very important and talented people coming on board to help with that. But right now, like if you watch season 4, that's not any solo rules. That's just me playing the game solo, like I would use any game with the Mythic GM emulator. But there's no specific solo rules yet. We've advertised that because there will be tools to play it solo. But I don't have them yet. So I can't really comment on that. But I will say that for me, and again, the game is designed for me, the game works best with a more manageable group. For me, the ideal group in an RPG is 1 GM and 3 players. That's the ideal group. So the game is sort of makes some assumptions sometimes that that's how big your group is going to be, but it doesn't really matter. If you have a bigger group, you can easily scale. Like, there's no problem at all. And I'll put little guidance in there too. Like I've already got guidance in there with the social encounter rules. Basically, in the social encounters, in some versions of it, or in some applications of the social encounters, you're trying to gain success levels before the timer die runs out. But if there's fewer people, there's less chance of you getting those success levels to get a reasonable success. So in those cases, the game can easily scale. You basically add to the tolerance of the NPC, or you lessen the requirements of the SLs. There's many ways to do it. So it'll work. It'll work no matter how big your group is. Dom 18269, a game about suffering, loving the sales pitch. Yeah, I know. Well, I gotta be honest. The game has rules for individual wounds and infection, so it's about suffering, not gonna lie. Okay. Larry G, did you change the character advancement rules from skill checks to something XP based? I never changed anything. The way that the XP was always based, or always worked, was that you gain XP by pursuing your goals, possibly shifting your personality. That's an optional rule, and completing journeys. But mostly it's about goals. And when you do that, you get a set number of experience points. And those experience points can be used for very specific things, 2 of which the most common ones are to increase your skills or to buy specialties, right? Which are kind of like feats in some other games. But a lot of games, if I'm remembering this correctly, I think Harnmaster is one of them. Certainly RuneQuest 3, I believe, is one of them. I might be wrong about this, but the general principle applies. In one or both of those games, when you rolled a skill in the game, succeeded or failed or whatever, or some version of that, then you put like a little tick beside the skill, and now that is a skill that you have the option of improving. So what that did was encouraged players to roll skills that they wanted to improve. All fine and good. I adopt the Mithras system style, where you just get experience points, you spend them however you want. And the reason why I like that better is because it gets out of the way. And honestly, it allows players to try and improve their character however they want without having to force them to role play a certain way in a certain scene or use a specific skill. It just, it just feels cleaner to me to just basically say, you've got this amount of XP, you can spend it however you want. Now, how XP works in terms of skill advancement of the game is you spend an XP for an XP roll. And what that means is you take your handy dandy D100 dice, and if you're trying to improve the skill, you spend 1 experience point and you roll the dice. And if you get over the current skill, then it increases by a small amount. But if you get the skill level or under, it increases by 1. So the idea is every time you spend an experience point on skill advancement, you get something out of it, but it's much easier to improve a skill you're not already good at, right? That's how that works. Giulio, Giulio, I don't know. I can't pronounce anybody's name. How will the Ironlands fit in your world? Well, as those of you who are fans of me, myself, and I know, the Ironlands are the setting of Season 2. And I spoke to Sean Tompkins specifically about that. I said, I'd love to mention the Ironlands in the book for Broken Empires. He said, absolutely. Do it, man. Absolutely. So the Ironlands are mentioned because they do exist. Now, you won't see them on the Broken Empires map. What you will see is something called the Iron Veil. And that is something I established in episode 1 of season 2. The idea that in my game, in my world, the Ironlands are separated from the real world by this thing called the Iron Veil, which is kind of like this. Basically, the Ironlands was this place where a long time ago, all of the empires got together and basically said, we're going to send our criminal scum there. Kind of like a fantasy Australia, right? Before Australia was Australia. And they did. And so they also put up something called the Iron Veil to separate it from the world so that nobody could ever escape. Well, people did escape, and people do go back and forth, but it's rare. You got to know the way. But the thing about the Ironlands is that they are, every year they get further and further away from the world. So every year it becomes harder and harder to find your way there. Almost like Valinor in Middle-earth, right? How it's just kind of getting further and further away all the time until eventually you're not going to be able to get there at all. So that's how the Ironlands work. Technically, people can be from the Ironlands in this game, although, like I said, you're not going to see a map of the Ironlands in my book. If you want to see a map of the Ironlands, go and buy Sean's game. Okay. Dieselpunk, 1945. Hey, Trevor, D100 games I am aware of, Warhammer and Mothership, occasionally suffer from whiffing, which can be frustrating and make things drag. Does Broken Empires do something to avoid this? Yes and no. The phrase whiffing, for those of you who don't know, means that if you have a game, and it's very, very typical in D100 games, where you don't have a great skill at something, and you roll and fail, nothing happens. And that sucks. However, in my experience, that is not truly the culprit. The culprit is not whether or not you whiff on that, because, I mean, if you have a 30% combat skill, you probably should find ways to get modifiers to make that skill better, like, attacking with surprise, ambushing, that kind of stuff, so that you don't whiff. That's the first thing. The second thing is, the real problem with games like Warhammer, and I'm specifically talking about 1st and 2nd edition here. Both games I love. Don't get me wrong. Love these games. But the problem I have with those games is the same problem with all the 40K games. Rogue Trader, Deathwatch, what was the one about the Inquisition? Dark Heresy. Is that, here's how that works in a fight. I'm going to try and attack you. And if I'm a first level, well, wouldn't call it first level. If I'm a starting character in Warhammer Fantasy, 1st edition, let's say, then my weapon skill is 35. Well, that's pretty terrible. Okay. But let's say I'm fighting a goblin. Okay. And I roll and I miss. Oh, well, I missed. Okay. But if I roll and hit, great, I hit him, right? No. He has a chance to defend against that. And now I don't remember whether Warhammer Fantasy 1st allowed a parry. I think it did. Anyway, the general thing with all of these games is, I attack. Oh, no, nothing happened because he parried. Oh, okay. All right, I attack. He didn't parry. Okay, great. You hit him. Do I do damage? Well, see, you hit him, but he's got toughness. So the toughness soaks it up. Nothing happens. Oh, okay. Well, I hit him, and I got past the toughness. Do I do anything? You did, but, well, he's got armor. So really nothing happened. Oh, okay. Well, I hit him, and I got past the toughness and the armor, and I did some damage. Did I kill him? Did I do anything? You hit him, you caused damage, but really nothing happens until he gets to 0. So nothing happened. And on and on and on. And that, to me, was the real culprit. It was that there was so many failure points at every step of the way that it was just an endless frustration. So my game does not quite do that, but my game handles it in a much more brutal fashion, because the reason why my game you won't see a lot of that is because hitting someone with the sword, if you get through their armor, which a really good hit, you're going to find a way through that armor, and you've got combat maneuvers to like bypass shields and all that kind of stuff. If you do that, a wound is not just a point of damage. A wound is a specific, immediate effect that may even incapacitate that person's hit location wherever they get hit. So combat is much faster in terms of its consequences in this game. And that mitigates that kind of whiff factor. So that's how that works. Whew, long answer. Dex McHenry. Hi, Trevor. I'm as much a wargamer as a role player. How fleshed out are the Broken Empire nations? Good question. Are they distinct enough to form individual characters and therefore army identities? Absolutely, they are. We are working very hard right now on fleshing out the setting. Me and my friend Ross from back home are doing incredible amounts of work on the background and the setting and the various peoples and languages and races that all inhabit that area. I was back home in Edmonton last week, and I picked up this incredible book right here. This is called The Celtic Cyclopedia by Matthew Boone and Tyler Omachinsky. This is not actually a game book, although ostensibly I think it's designed to be used with the game Fate of the Norns. But this is not like, there's no system stuff in here. This is purely system neutral. This is just about Celtic mythology. But it's Celtic mythology. It's like what happened to the Celts when the Viking Ragnarok happened. That's what this book is. It is super cool. But the point of this is that I read some things in here that completely inspired me to create all kinds of new stuff. So there's a place in the world called the Blacklands of Dunblane, which is very much kind of like a Scotland, Ireland kind of. It's where Edbert is from season 3. The Irishman, Edbert, he's from there. He's from the Blacklands of Dunblane, right? So it's got a very heavy Celtic influence. So this thing has really spurred a bunch of ideas that have really started to affect other parts of the world too. So that's happening. We're trying to have like a really quality world background setting chapter or chapters in the book. We're not going to be able to give you as much detail as we want because, of course, there's only so many pages we can put in the book. But we're trying to give you a lot of stuff so that you would be able to say, oh, well, the Tikal Dondalese are mostly a naval empire. I bet you they would have these fleets here. And the Angavarans are a land power. And da-da-da-da-da-da. So you can do all that stuff. Okay. Avengers. Oh, hello, Avenger. Hello, my friend. Howdy from Scotland. So excited for this. And I'm excited to have you here, my friend. Oh, hey, it's great. All right. Juij Guguilo. I've already answered one of yours, but I want to address this question. Have you considered to add a sort of momentum pool to the system similar to Ironsworn or what D20 does? 2D20, the Dune and system and Conan and Acton Cthulhu, which, by the way, Modifius sent me the starter set of Acton Cthulhu, and I've been meaning to do a review of it forever, and I haven't got a chance to. Much to my chagrin, because it's awesome. I love this set. I'm not a huge fan of the game system, but I love the package of the set. I love the adventure. I love the idea. Now, I will address this. The momentum system of 2D20, I've never liked. And the reason why I don't like it, let me try and give you a brief synopsis of it for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about. And I may get this wrong because I'm no expert on the Modifius system, okay? And it's not just Modifius. There's a lot of games that use this kind of thing. I do not like mechanics in games that encourage an adversarial relationship between player and GM. So what does that mean? I do not like a game like Fate. Let's take Fate. Original, what am I thinking? I'm thinking of Spirit of the Century, which I think was one of the very first Fate games released, which I have, of course, in the Sage's Library. In Fate, if you want to, if I'm the GM and I want to tag your disadvantage, these are not the terms, but I'm just trying to, give a sense of what this is all about. If I want to tag your disadvantage, so you've got a disadvantage of, I don't know, bad limp or something, and you're in a fight, and I want to tag you to be like, I think that your limp comes into play, and I'm going to offer you this shiny fate point as a reward. At that point, the character or the player has the choice of accepting that reward and allowing the limp to, screw him up in that moment. That's all fine and good. But then it says, if the player refuses that, if the player says, no, I don't want to suffer from that right now. No, thank you. Then the player has to play the GM a fate point. So it costs the player no matter what. It's kind of like a screw you, buddy. I hate that. I cannot stand mechanics that pit the GM against the player because it's not an adversarial relationship. This is not a board game where one person's on one side and the other person's on the other. This is ultimately a cooperative game. The GM should be rooting for the success of the players, if not explicitly helping them. That is not the GM's job. But it is the GM's job to put obstacles in the way for the characters to overcome, but the GM should be rooting for the players, right? Because we're all trying to have fun together, and it's just better that way. So I don't like mechanics that go back and forth. So the Doom pool in Conan, and I've never played Conan, so do not take this as gospel. But from what I have seen, the Doom pool basically says if I want to do something cool, I'm going to spend this point, but then like the GM gets that point and can use it against you. Or if it's not the Doom pool in 2D20, then that's the Star Wars force point mechanic in the Fantasy Flight game Edge of the Empire, if I recall correctly. Regardless of the details, I don't like those kinds of mechanics. I don't like adversarial mechanics because it creates a sense that I'm using this resource against you. That's not the function of a GM in my estimation. And also, as a GM, I don't need permission. I don't need a system's permission to throw bad things at the players. I can just do that. I am the almighty God. I can do that if I want, and by God, I will. So I don't like a game system that regulates how I run my game and encourages adversarial stuff. So that's why you won't see any of that kind of stuff in the Broken Empires. Whew! I'm gonna have some of my non-alcoholic beer here. Wow. Not a sponsor. All right. We are getting behind. Oh boy. Oh boy. Nor'easter Brewmaster, do you have experience or thoughts on the Genesis narrative dice system? Star Wars Edge of the Empire, I just mentioned. Do I have thoughts on it? Yes. Do I have experience with it? Yes. I think it's cool on paper, but I don't love how it plays at the table. I don't want to get into too much about this because it makes it sound like I'm slagging another game system, and that's not at all what I'm doing. But for me, the Genesis system with all of its various symbols, when I roll a dice pool and I see all these symbols, I have to learn that language first. I have to learn the language of those things, and I have to internalize that language so much that I understand intuitively what those symbols and specifically what those combinations of symbols mean at a glance. Because otherwise, I'm going to spend most of my time looking it up and trying to figure out what this combination of symbols means, and that kills your game. Correction, that killed my games. So I didn't like that. But I think it's cool. I think they look neat, and I like what it does philosophically. I like the idea that it gives you far more than just a binary response. I love that it gives you multiple types of answers from one roll. That's really neat. Excuse me. All right. Alex. Oh, hey, Alex. You touched a bit on this with the base building from Forbidden Lands. My question is, what are some ideas that you want to add but will probably need a second book for? Oh, boy. There's lots. Well, the base building thing for sure. I am a big fan of Stars Without Number by Kevin Crawford and all of his books. And I would love to put in some kind of section in there about the DM's mini game in between sessions to have factions working in the background. But I'm not going to have time to do it for this. So that's something I would love to add to the game, especially as the factions get more developed, as the world gets fleshed out. I think it's going to be easier to do it then anyway. So yeah, there's lots of stuff. There's a naval combat thing that I want to do. There's a mass combat system that I want to implement. There's lots of stuff. So if this Kickstarter goes well, and it's all up to you, friends, to make sure that it does, there will be more. This will be a supported line. Believe me. All right. Oh, Panayotis Gotis. For Patreon, should we use the chat there? No, you can just go here, and I will see it here. Okay, speaking of patrons, let's see here. Let me scroll down and see. We've got Vortec, Nexus. Nexus says, Nexus 6 says, so cool to have Ironland somewhere in the lore. Yeah, it is neat. It's like a cool crossover, right? I love it. It's cool. Christopher Stevenson, in the spirit of suffering. Now you guys are going to get all hung up on this. The spirit of suffering, what do you think about the idea of a negative skill representing long-term corruption? A negative skill representing long-term corruption. I guess that would depend how it's implemented. I have ways of doing that within the game already, which are a little simpler without having to introduce a new mechanic. But hey, man, I'm always interested in new ways of doing things. So if you got an idea, by all means, let me know. All right. Brad S. says, getting a box of stuff is even more exciting than just getting a book. Yes, although the book is going to be awesome. We are so excited about how the book's coming out, especially the premium book. It's going to have these awesome embossed pages and cool stuff. It's just going to be great. Okay, Bill N. says, 5 parsecs from home made a great story. Yes, it did. Oh, that was pretty cool how it turned out in the end. Ha ha! It was good stuff. And then he says, Trevor made a great story. 5 parsecs helped. Well, you're very kind. I was just following the rules, my friend, following the rules. Okay, Thundercat791, can you talk about the magic in Broken Empires? Not so much the rules aspect, but the lore of it. Yes, I can. For instance, I've heard you mention the weave. What is that? Okay, I'm going to tell you something now. Magic is not just who can blast fire from their fingertips. Magic is a core part of the cosmology of the world. Reality in the Broken Empires it can be conceived as a tapestry. The great tapestry of reality, okay? Upon which everyone's lives are etched and stitched, okay? What a spellweaver does is pull at the various strands of that tapestry and reweave them into a pattern that is pleasing to them. However, reality does not like it when a spellweaver does this, and reality fights back. Reality does something called weave reactions. The weave of reality reacts to your trying to futz with it. So, the goal, and again, I'm not getting into rules here, but the true spellweaver who's smart knows that the goal as a spellweaver is to cast magic in such a way that is beneath the attention of the weave. Now, that is much easier said than done. But the more subtle you can make your magical effect, the less likely the weave is to react. And when the weave reacts, it can be very bad. You have to expend enormous quantities of resolve in order to avoid the worst of the weave reactions. So if you can just, head that off at the pass when you craft the spell, so much the better. So spells in this game are more about being like Gandalf than about being like Raistlin, if that means anything to you. As a spellweaver, you want to have subtle magic, because if you do that, less chance of a weave reaction. Now, for those of you who've watched the show from season 1, you will know that in season 1, there was all kinds of big magical effects, people hucking fireballs and stuff, because I was using Savage Worlds. But the game has evolved, and the setting has evolved, and this is one of the evolutions. So that is what the weave is. It is literally the weave of reality, is the tapestry and the fabric of reality. And I will say this as well. Spellweavers, by screwing with reality, one of the weave reactions that can happen is something called the fraying. And the fraying means that a part of your pattern on the tapestry starts to fray at the edges. And the more you suffer from fraying weave reactions, the more your pattern degrades, until one day the weave plucks you from the fabric of reality entirely. So every spellcaster is a ticking clock, which is why you do not see spellcasters blasting off huge ritual magics every 10 minutes, because they know the cost of that is going to eventually remove them from reality. So, it's a built-in limiting factor of magic. So, Vortex says, is the magic system pretty much done, or have there been recent changes? Yes, it is mostly done, and yes, there have been recent changes. There's always adjustments. I just changed the way that weave reactions happen to make it easier to GM. Because as I was running the games in playtests, I realized this is really cool unless you're the GM, in which case it is a nightmare. And I thought, well, that's no fun. It's got to be fun. We get obsessed with having really cool rules and really cool, innovative ways of doing things and mechanics and stuff. But you got to always come back to, but is it fun? Because if it's not fun, it's pointless. No one's ever going to do it. So that's my current thing right now. I'm always taking the rules back to, yeah, but is it fun? But is it fun? And of course, that's going to be subjective. What's fun for me might not be fun for you, but I got to be honest with my own game. And if it's fun for me, that's what's going to go in the game book. But yeah, it's got to be fun. So I changed the concept of some aspects of Magic to make it easier to run for the GM. And so far, so good. It's exciting. It's exciting stuff as we make these changes. And I say we because I've got like this crack team of friends of mine, old friends, who are basically my de facto rules consultants on this. And it's been unbelievably helpful having these guys to help me with this. I couldn't have done this without them. So shout out to you guys, Jared and Ross and Dan and Craig and all of you guys that have helped. Travis and Nav and Carson and Ty and everybody. Okay. Chief McLean, this is a good question. I'm curious about it and I haven't seen it in play. How does the Broken Empires handle inventory management and encumbrance? Ooh, I'm very glad you asked, Sal, because no one's asked about this. Inventory management. Okay, this is super cool. I'm excited about this. But I also don't have to say too much because we haven't launched the Kickstarter yet, but I will say this. Encumbrance, yes, you can only carry so much. Period, right? We're only so strong, okay? However, encumbrance, what it does is it saps your resolve. Your resolve in the game is a little pool of points that you as a character have that allows you to succeed better or worse at skills. So it's not a meta currency. It's not like a plot point or a story point. Oh, and by the way, I've removed the idea that resolve gets you rerolls. Rerolls are no longer in the game. They're out, they're jettisoned. You cannot reroll dice now. What you can do is spend your resolve to increase the chance of the skill before the roll or increase the success level of the skill after the roll, but it's up to you to choose that. So, encumbrance eats into your resolve from the upper levels. The more you go over something called your encumbrance threshold, the less of your resolve is available to you. Now, there's ways to mitigate this. For example, warriors get something called armor training. And armor training basically really reduces the encumbrance value of armor so that it doesn't sap into your resolve as much. But spellcasters, for example, they need their resolve really, really, really bad. So spellcasters are not going to be wearing a bunch of armor, probably, because it just eats into that resolve and they desperately need their resolve in order to fuel their spells. So it's kind of a balancing mechanic without having to have a class, right? Or a level situation. And inventory management, yeah, you have to carry stuff, but I've adopted the idea of supply dice from Forbidden Lands, which I've always loved. And Forbidden Lands isn't the only game that does this, but it's where I found it and where I loved it. There's basically a couple of different types of supply dice. They all have encumbrance values, but they don't change. It's basic. Let me go back. A supply die is a die between D6 and D12 that represents a thing. So, for example, ammunition. You don't count arrows in the game. You can fire off a bunch of arrows, but every time you make a ranged attack with a bow, at the end of the attack, you then roll your supply die. And it's going to be, as I said, between D6 and D12. And if that supply die comes up 1 or 2, it decreases a step. So it's another timer. It's another hard choice. It's, oh, do I really want to shoot? I'm only at a D6. I've got a 1 in 3 chance of being empty after the shot. Everything in the game is designed to do that, to basically make everything a hard choice. So we have a supply die type called gear. And gear is literally everything your character would reasonably have in this moment. So, would your character reasonably have a torch when you're exploring a cave? Well, that depends on the character, but probably. Okay, so the character pulls a torch. This actually happened in Season 9. Season 9? Not Season 9, Episode 9 of Season 4. The very last episode I released last week or whenever it was. Where Vale was going into this dark area, she pulled a torch. Yes, she did. She's got it. And then I rolled the supply die, which was D12. And if I'd rolled a 1 or 2, now her supply die is at a D10. So you have whatever you need that is reasonable. You can't just pull, I'm going to pull an elephant out of my pack. Why would you have an elephant, right? Maybe your character would, but probably not. So whatever you have that is reasonable, you can produce. You have it. But then you have to roll that die. And eventually that gear die gets knocked down. And there's ways for your gear dice to be reduced over travel. And there's all kinds of things. So that's basically how inventory management works. You've got these supply dice types, and there's only a couple of them. But they represent all of your consumables. And that's that. And it works great. Okay. Adiacent. I'm going to butcher your names, guys. Your handles, rather. Will the game be complete in one book? Absolutely. I am a huge proponent of a full game in one book. Another reason why I love Warhammer Fantasy First Edition roleplay. because it is a complete book. Everything you need. I ran 2 whole campaigns using only the core rulebook. It was like a 350-page book or something. But in it, you had the setting, you had character creation, combat, magic, monsters, the divine, gods, everything. An introductory adventure, right? So I love a book that has everything in it. Now, marketers will tell me that's the stupidest thing I could do. Marketers will say, you can't do that. You have to have the supplement treadmill. I'm not a big company. I'm a guy, and I'm trying to give you something that I would buy myself. And for me, a complete book with everything in it that I can start a campaign tomorrow, that's what I would buy, and so that's what I'm going to be giving to you. Rollboo, watching you play the Broken Empires, it feels like a lot to keep track of. Do you plan for a flowchart or cheat sheet DM screen that summarizes available options? 100%. So much about running a more simulationist game is being organized. If you are organized, and I've got little tables, like I've got enemy tables, and I've got round tables, so if you've got that, yep, you can keep track of it, no problem. If you don't, you get hopelessly lost. So yes, that is definitely going to be part of it. It's already in the main book, but we're talking about having like separate cheat sheets and stuff, and we are doing a DM screen as well, so there's going to be stuff for that on the screen, because it's so crucial in a sim-light game like this that you are organized, because there's more to keep track of. Right? Although I'd be curious to see a side-by-side competition, a side-by-side comparison between a game like this and something like Pathfinder 2e, or even 5e, to see really how much more you have to track in my game than you do in those games. Because I would probably bet that it might even be less than something like Pathfinder. Which brings me to something that a lot of people say. They say, oh, this seems really crunchy. Well, first of all, crunchy, by the way, specifically refers to math. Crunchy, when they talk about a crunchy game, what they really mean, or what they originally meant, the term has kind of been bastardized a bit, but crunchy means, is there a lot of math, a lot of calculation? Rollmaster is a crunchy game. You cannot play that game unless you either have a calculator in your hand or in your brain. I do not have one in my brain, so I needed one in my hand. That's a crunchy game. Crunchy is often used to denote rules heavy, but those are not the same things. The Broken Empires is certainly heavier on the rules than a game like Into the Odd, for example, but it's not crunchy. There's not a lot of math you have to do. It's very simple. I kept the math very simple in the game because I am not friends with math. Math and I are old enemies, and I will thwart the ambitions and designs of math whenever I can. I will thwart my old enemy. So it's not a crunchy game, but it is a more complex game. And that's the way it is. Okay. Wow. Oh, so much, guys. All right, here we are. Colton Coolis, did you struggle at all with Ironsworn in Season 2? I've run 2 solo games, and I always find myself disliking the lack of agency my characters have based on the whims of the dice. Interesting. I did struggle, but not in the way that you seem to be struggling. I struggled with trying to understand how a truly narrative game works, because I'm a more simulationist guy, right? I'm a more... I tend to glom to rules that are more simulations, hence the Broken Empires, right? Ironsworn is more... It has a solid set of mechanics, but there's a lot of abstraction where I'm not used to having abstraction, and that took me a good 3 or 4 sessions to really grok, to really figure out. But in terms of the character agency thing, I don't have that problem, because in a game like Ironsworn, you form the questions. You decide what the questions are that you're asking the Oracle dice. So you are establishing the objective. You're also establishing the consequences. You can interpret those consequences however you want. I find it endlessly fascinating when people talk about solo games in particular. You would think, looking at solo games, that the temptation would be to cheat to make it easier for your character. You would think, well, if I can choose the consequences for my character, of course I'm going to choose the easiest way out. And yet, we almost never see this. What we see is the opposite, which, that's great. I think it's much better to err on the side of that than making things too easy. But what we see far more often is people making it way too hard on themselves. But you don't have to do that. It just takes practice, man. It just takes practice. You gotta lighten up on yourself a little bit. You gotta go easy sometimes. And remember too that in a game like Ironsworn, when you pay the price in a fight, that does not necessarily mean you get hit with the enemy's sword. It could mean you get knocked down, and now you're at disadvantage for the next thing you do, or whatever, right? Like my advice to anybody who's having these issues: read more fantasy books. Not watch more shows, read more fantasy books, because the written word will inspire you. You will read more versions of combat encounters or things, and it will inspire you to think about combat differently. It'll give you different terms, it'll give you different ideas for combat setups or consequences. Read more fantasy. Yes, actual words on a page, digital or otherwise. That is the best advice I can give anybody, I think, for that. All right, where are we here? Linus, follow-up question to Josh's question. Does the Broken Empires have a system in place for solo play overworld exploration, like, for example, Forbidden Lands or League of Dungeoneers? Again, the solo aspect has not yet been developed fully, or like there's very little that this of the solo stuff that's been developed. But as I said at the beginning, I have a couple of very, very, very influential and smart people coming on board to help with that. So I'm not concerned about it at all, but I don't have it yet, so I can't speak to that. But in terms of overworld exploration, yes, there are basically two ways of traveling. One is more of a journey system, which is heavily inspired by the One Ring, although it uses some quite different mechanics, where the players know where they're going, and now they got to get there. And the central question is, how exhausted are they when they arrive? Because if it's an adventure site, right, they don't want to be exhausted. And what dangers and or opportunities will befall them on the way? Those are the two central questions of a journey when you know your destination. But if you don't know your destination, you have something more of a hexploration. If you're just exploring the wilds, you use slightly different rules, and I'm still developing those, but they do exist. Because I like to have both, right? I like to have the options for both. Geary, hi, call me Zero. Okay, Zero. I'll go with a tough question. Thank you. I like tough questions. Why just don't play against the Dark Master or Warhammer? Why play your game? Love your work. Thank you. Great question. Why not play against the Dark Master? Or why not just play Warhammer? Because those games scratch different itches than mine does. Against the Dark Master, I do love, but it treats things very differently than I do. Its core mechanic is very different. The core mechanic of Against the Dark Master is the same as Rollmaster, is the same as MERPs. You roll your percentiles, you add your bonus, and then compare that to a chart. There are no charts in my game from the player's standpoint. Or there's one. There's the hit location chart, but you memorize that immediately. There are no charts. You don't need to consult a matrix to run a combat in this game. You don't need to. Don't need it. Against the Dark Master, you absolutely do need to. They're a phase-based game. I'm more traditional initiative, although there's changes to mine as well. So, different experience. It's a completely different experience. Their setting is also very Middle-earth-y, which I love. My setting is not. My setting is kind of a hodgepodge, but it's got more sword and sorcery aspects to it than Middle-earth aspects to it. There are Middle-earth aspects, of course. Of course there are. But it's more the other side. Like it's a more humanocentric world, for example. And in terms of Warhammer really is all about the setting. The setting of Warhammer is miraculous. This early Renaissance, late Dark Age, pseudo-Europe, where everything is dark and grim, and the idea that chaos is seething under the surface, waiting to rise up and overtake the ignorant masses who have been gaslit into believing that none of this is actually happening. It's just one of the most brilliant settings of all time. The system itself, meh. I mean, I loved it for years. I ran it for years, but kind of meh, especially by today's standards. Someone asked me before, do you think that game systems have evolved? And yes, that's a perfect example. Warhammer 1st Edition works great, but you know, it's kind of clunky in places, and it could do things better because it was written in 1986. So of course, it could do things better today. We've had 30 years or 40 years, however long it's been. So why not just play Warhammer? Because it's a completely different experience in the Broken Empires. Not only system-wise, completely different experience, but setting-wise. Warhammer 4th Edition has more in common with the Broken Empires as a system. But even so, like, they use success levels. right? But they calculate things differently, and they have things called I'm going to get the terminology wrong, but basically in Warhammer, whenever two people face off, there's always a victor and something always happens because they were responding to the whiff factor that somebody had asked me about before. They wanted to eliminate the whiff factor. I appreciate that. I just don't like how they implement it. To me, it's overly complex. Hilariously, a lot of people are going to say that about my game, which is fine. It's all subjective. I just don't like the way they handle it, and they have something called advantage, is it? Or momentum, something like that, which I would have done differently. But that's okay. It's okay. The point is, why play against the Dark Master or Warhammer or the Broken Empires? Because all three of those games provide radically different experiences. Remember that, yes, we're talking about numbers when it comes to resolution. We need to know, do I hit the orc with my sword? But there is a huge difference of feel, both tactile and emotional and visual and everything. There's a huge difference between rolling a D20 and rolling a 1D100 or rolling a dice pool or rolling anything else. 3D6 and adding and rolling under or against a target number. All of these things have very different play experiences. Hence why it's impossible to have the perfect game for me, because I love them all. But I can't have them all. I had to pick one. All right. Darius, I think that your battle rules might be a really good base for a fantasy martial arts setting. Perhaps. That scares me to try and implement that right now, so I'm going to avoid that, but perhaps. Okay. Chromie, what I love about the Genesis Star Wars game, that's with the dice pool with the symbols, is that I've noticed those narrative dice almost work as guardrails. Players who tend to be quieter feel empowered to take a more active role in building up a scene. Yeah, I think you're right. And if that's the focus of your game, if you want players to be more descriptive, if players ostensibly have some of the powers of a GM in terms of establishing the narrative, establishing the scene, then that system is great. But if they don't, if it's a more traditional thing, if your players are there to be players and not GMs, which is very common, I feel that way, all of my friends feel that way. When we sit down to play a game, if I'm a player, I don't want any GM powers. No, that's not why I'm here. I'm here to be a player. I want to experience the world through the eyes of my character. I don't want to have any meta currency or abilities to shape their narrative or to say, oh, well, I think that I'm going to spend this action point or plot point and have a friend walk in, or I'm going to pay a special fate point and there's actually a shotgun on the inside of the bar or something. There's nothing wrong with those games, but they're very different experiences than the ones that I tend to like. Because I am the forever DM. So when I am a player, when I get that wonderful opportunity to be a player, I just want to be a player. I don't want any GM tools helping me. But you're not wrong. You're totally right about that. James, do you have any idea what your international shipping rates will be like? Yeah, they will be utterly subject to whatever powers that be. I have no control over that. It's going to be expensive. And I think you're in New Zealand, right, James? If I remember that correctly? Or somewhere, or South Africa. God, even worse, even farther. It's not going to be cheap, man. It's not going to be cheap. I wish I could tell you otherwise, but it's just the way it is. I have zero control over that. So it sucks. If I had an outlet store in South Africa, then it'd be easier. But like I said, I'm just some guy. Oh, hello from Italy. Hello, Pierluigi Madao. Hello. All right. Reinhold question, any playable sample of the Broken Empires during the Kickstarter, something we can bring to the table? I don't know yet. I suspect not. A lot of people release free PDFs of the rules to play. I don't think that's going to be the case here. And the reason is I'm still developing the game. So I don't want to give you a false idea of what the game is if I know that I've still got 6 months of playtesting or 3 months or whatever it's going to be until the game is actually sent to the printers. Because I don't want you to get a sense of something that is perhaps radically different, which again, it's not going to be radically. I'm just not like guess what, guys? Now you roll a d20 against armor class. That's not going to happen. But I don't know. That is up in the air still, but I suspect not. And I know a lot of people do it, and a lot of people say, "Oh, well, if I don't get a sense of what the game is, why should I buy it?" Right, you're right. So that's okay. I understand. But that's the way it is. All right. Scott Pyle, will the book feature slick paper or the rougher, more cloth? Oh no, I lost it. Where did it go? Oh no. Will the book feature slick paper or the rougher, more cloth-like paper found in the One Ring? We're working that out, but I love a good book and I love good quality stuff. It's going to be the best quality we can possibly get. So I'm not a fan of slick paper. I'm also not a fan of glossy paper because these eyes suck. And if there's any light source, it's going to reflect right on the spot where I can't see the words. So probably matte is going to be our finish. Stone binding, that's the goal. Again, I'm trying to get, like, we're working with the best people we can possibly find. So we're trying to get especially with the premium book, we're trying to make sure that if you shell out the clams for the premium book, that you're getting a premium book. Because I love a good premium book, and I want it, do you guys have the same thing? Okay. Panayotis, what are your plans for adversaries, whether other PC-like opponents or monsters? Are you going to have a detailed bestiary, builders, or generators? The answer is yes, yes, and yes. Yes. The bestiary in the book is not going to be like 300 pages of monsters, but it's going to give you enough examples to give you a guide of how to do it yourself with some extra tools in there as well. Like I said, I want to give a full experience in one book, so that you can run a whole campaign with one book, right? You shouldn't have to buy a separate bestiary, right? Now, if this whole thing goes well, yeah, we'll probably release like an advanced book or like an expanded bestiary, a whole new monsters, 200 more monsters or whatever in the future. But we're not talking about the future, we're talking about now. And for right now, I want that book to be as comprehensive as possible, which means you're going to have all that stuff in there. Okay. Bill N says, weave reactions remind me of paradox from Mage and Ars Magica. Yeah, that's another influence of the game, is the concept of paradox. Although it works a little differently in Mage. And I'm no Mage expert. But the idea of Mage is that, or a paradox in Mage, is that, I could be wrong about this, but this is what I remember. If basically someone sees you messing with reality, that's going to trigger reality to go, ah! So in Mage, you don't want to, you want to be really quiet and surreptitious because you don't want people to notice. My game's slightly different, but same basic idea. You don't want to be noticed. You want to be subtle is the whole point of that. Colton, are you going to have a lore reason to justify the Savage Worlds fireballs in Season 1 or just retcon that form of magic? There is kind of a lore reason already, and it is already built into the magic. In fact, the character that I use as an example in the magic chapter is Fane Rosetta, who is the guy that was casting those. He was an earthbinder. He was casting earth-based spells. He's the example character, and he uses that kind of magic in the examples in the book. So it is explained. He just triggers a lot of weave reactions, or he would have if he didn't die. Spoilers! Okay. Resolve is a game mechanic, but in the lore, how would a spellcaster thinking about resolve overcome weave reactions? It is literally resolve. It is your inner grit, your inner strength. It's what you got in the tank. And you've only got so much before you're essentially exhausted. Yeah. So yeah, it's both mechanical and in-game. So yes. All right. As Gilame, how do you feel about noodly magic stuff like Bags of Holding? I think they're great in games like D&D. Ricardo, for me, Crunchy was rules heavy, and I still believe it is how people think about Crunchy games. I think you're right, but I'm just telling you that in the original use of that term, it meant specifically math heavy games. It has been corrupted and distorted to mean rules heavy, but that is not actually what it meant originally. When I use Crunchy, what I'm talking about is math. So, is the Broken Empires a Crunchy game? Nope. Is it a rules more complex? Yes, it is. Is it so complex as to be incomprehensible? I certainly hope not. It's not for me. All right. Oh, Black Lodge Games. Hey, guys. Random encounters and wilderness rules can generally be used solo on their own without explicit solo systems. Absolutely true. Absolutely freaking true. Ozarus, can't wait to play. Sending you good vibes from Newfoundland. Good to see you, my friend. Buddy. I'm just falling out of my chair here. I love Newfoundland. I've been there a number of times. Love it. Suiza, what is a high-level recap on the game? What is a high-level recap on the game? Are you just joining us late and you want me to talk about what I talked about for the last hour? Because if so, I ain't going to do that. But you can scroll back and listen. Black Lodge again. Hit locations also make for more dynamic and immersive combat. Well, as a matter of fact, they do. I used to think it would be needless bookkeeping until I had my legs shredded in Cyberpunk 2020. Can't go back now. Totally, man. Of course, hit locations are really great, but they do slow the game down. That is just a fact. And I'm not, like, I've said this a million times, but I don't shy away from that. I don't mind if the game slows down a little bit if the return on the time invested is worth it. And for me, in a game like The Broken Empires, or even Cyberpunk 2020, the return on time invested, the roti, is totally worth it because it relieves the GM's burden of description. It literally tells the story for you. I have a phrase in my show, the dice always tell the story. That is literally true with this. The dice literally, in my game, when you roll an attack, you are not just seeing if you hit, you are seeing if you hit, how hard you hit, the quality of the hit, the type of combat maneuvers you're going to be able to perform because of the hit, and where you hit. All of that in one roll. So I'm trying to reduce the time spent getting that detail as much as possible. So far, so good. But yes, it certainly enhances roleplay opportunities. If I know that I'm suffering from a slash to my left thigh, that is a huge difference than I took 3 hit points damage. 3 hit points damage doesn't mean anything. It's just some abstract thing, which is great for speed of play. If your goal is to get through things quick, then that's what you want. But if your goal is to be able to immerse yourself into those wounds and suffer, then yeah, head locations all the way. All right. Jim Seymour, hey, me, Trevor, first time on with you live on my birthday. Happy birthday, Jim. Thanks for joining us. Steel the Warrior, a channel supporter. Do you currently have any plans for mechanics for alchemy and herbalism? Most systems gloss over such things, despite them having been so important in medieval fantasy. I do, in fact, have rules for alchemy and herbalism. They are not hugely fleshed out at the moment, but they are definitely there. There's a whole section in the magic chapter for alchemy that you don't actually need magic for. You have a skill in the game called Nature Wise, which allows you to create such healing salves and potions and things. So, yeah, I'm one of those super nerds that gets really excited when I read like herbal rules from MERPs, you know, like the Middle Earth role-playing system, when there's a whole bunch of rules for how many herbs I find and what they do. Oh, it's a berry I can crush into paste and put in my wound to heal stun relief. I love that stuff. So yes, there's going to be stuff like that in there. Oh, you would think I've never kissed a girl, but I'm married, so I have. All right. Kave Shabajan. Butchery, I say. Butchery to the name. First, I fell in love with soloing. Again, watching your amazing second season using Iron Swarm. All of them are amazing. Awesome. People always ask me what my favorite season is. It really is like asking me what my favorite child is. It's hard because they're all so different and they all provide such different experiences for me. But they all turned out pretty good. I'm pretty proud of it, considering it's just me, you know? All right. Nor'easter Brewmaster, I prefer rules light games for sure, but rules heavy games are okay, as long as those rules add to the fun and are not just additional tedium. Bingo, my friend, bingo. That is exactly what I'm talking about. Rules for rules' sake? Meh, I have no time for that. The only time I introduce a rule is if it gives me the level of detail that increases my immersion, that increases my feeling of that I'm there in the world, seeing the world through the eyes of the character. That detail is very crucial to me. That's the reason why, like, my encumbrance rules are based on supply dice. Someone said the Schrodinger's encumbrance or something like that. I'm not interested in detailed encumbrance rules. What I am interested in is the effects of having dwindling resources has on my adventure. That's what I'm interested in. I don't want to ignore the fact that wearing heavy armor is encumbering, because that's crucial. That's important to know. But I don't want a bunch of niggly rules about each piece giving. It's too much. I do have rules. Encumbrance for wearing armor. You get penalized at certain skills, but they're easy to learn, right? But I only have a rule in there if it enhances what I consider to be the immersive properties of the game. If it's a rule just because, well, we need a rule for every possible permutation of event, otherwise it's just not realistic. All right. All right. Oh, it's exhausting talking to you guys. Exhausting. Black Lodge Games again. Yeah, speed is a trade-off. It is great for D&D style games, but not for others. Yeah, totally, dude. Totally. I'm going to have to come on your show, because every time I see a comment from you or I see your video, I'm like, I think these guys, I think they run games like I do. I think we got a shared thing going on here. All right. Are you going to release a SRD or a free version of the rules like most publishers do to test the waters? No. No, I'm not. I'm not like most publishers. I'm not even a publisher. I'm a guy. I'm a guy writing a game, and luckily, I have a bunch of playtesters already that are doing that work, so I don't need everybody to do the work. I understand. I'm a first-time Kickstarter, and people are going to say, well, how do we know? How do we know that you're not just going to take our money and run? Trust me. No, I'm really not. Those of you who have seen my show know that I'm not just some guy. I actually really do accomplish things. I've accomplished 3.5 seasons already of a very, very complicated RPG show. So if you want to see how the game plays, you can watch the show. You can watch the videos that I put out with Kelsey and Dave Thalmavor and Professor DM. There's going to be more things coming as well to give you a real sense. And as the Kickstarter progresses, I'm going to give more and more details too. So those of you who back, you're going to get a good sense of stuff, right? The only reason why I'm not releasing a lot of details now is because we haven't launched yet, right? As soon as we do that, then those of you who are on board, yeah, I want you to know what you're getting, of course, because I want you to be excited about what you're getting. You know, there's no point of you going, well, I don't know if this is worth it. No, I want you to feel like, yeah, I can't wait for this thing. So, of course, you need information for that. So you're going to get that. Okay. Steel the Warrior, you retracted your message. Were you swearing at me? Dom says, will you be demonstrating the Broken Empires as you develop it on Me, Myself, and Die? Do I even need to respond to that? My goodness. Rollboo, have you looked at MCDM's Strongholds and Followers, or Kingdoms and Warfare? Very different takes on large-scale stuff. One very detailed, simmy, one very abstract in general. How would you do that? I have not looked at it. I'm of two minds of this. The system, the mass combat system that I use in games is part war game, but not full war game. I understand the usefulness of very narrative-only mass combat systems. Like, I think Savage Worlds, at least the version that I use, Savage Worlds, has a very narrative version of mass combat. And it works. Works great. But I like to get in there, man. I like to get in there. I like to see the units suffering losses as they exchange blows on the side of the hill and then get flanked by the cavalry. I love all that stuff, as long as it doesn't turn into a pure war game, because that then takes days and days and days. So I want the system I am developing for the Broken Empires. That's not probably going to be in the main book. It just, there's no room for it. But it'll be there. It'll be available eventually. I don't know. I'm of two minds. I am of two minds. And again, I can see myself providing both options, like a more narrative version and a more gritty, get your stuff on the table and fight it out stuff. Because I like providing options, right? Because I know everybody has different tastes. So the more options I can give you to accommodate for the tastes that I can't possibly know what you have are, the better, right? Okay. Ike D says, my perspective of complex was completely blown up with Legend of the Five Rings. We were new and spent 15 minutes preparing for a single roll. I hope TBE isn't to that point. It is not. And I assume you're talking about the Fantasy Flight version with the custom dice, because that is not the only version of Legend of the Five Rings. The version that I'm at all familiar with, which I'm that much familiar with it, is not the Fantasy Flight version. So they don't use that dice system. But no, No, it's not. It's a percentile system. The Broken Empress is percentile. You look at your skill. Your skill is 65. Okay. Do I have any modifiers to that? Yeah, because of this circumstance, you're plus 10. Great. You're rolling on 75. Roll. Great. Did you succeed? You succeeded. Do you need to know how many success levels you got? Yeah. What was the 10s die? Oh, you rolled 52? You got 5 success levels. Great. That's the game. Okay. Oh yeah, Black Lodge, happy to have you on anytime. And will Broken Empires have an open license for third-party content? First of all, thank you. Yeah, we're gonna have to set that up. We've been kind of talking on email about that, but we have to set that up. Will Broken Empires have an open license for third-party content? This has been the debate back and forth for 6 months, and I have not yet landed on an answer. There's pros and cons, obviously, to both, but my inclination is to say probably not. For reasons, but maybe. There's many things we're still trying to figure out. And when I say we, by the way, I have a very small, dedicated team that's spread out across countries and cities. I've got my key people here. There's 2 or 3 people here in town where I live, and then I got people back home in Edmonton. I got people in Vancouver. I got people all over the place who are working very hard to make this stuff happen. So that's what I meant when I say we. All right, Micro Dude, I see Shattered Empires as filling its own niche. Do you mean Broken Empires? I'm unfamiliar with the Shattered Empires. Is that a competing product? Are you planning a legal agreement to turn third-party creators loose? Okay, this is the same question as Black Lodge. Yeah, I don't know. We'll see. We shall see. Ryan Holt says, I'm just super excited and cannot wait to play. That is all. This is it. Good. Awesome. Rollboo, anything we can do right now to support the Kickstarter? Yeah, man. You can talk about it on social media. You can do all of the stuff that the kids do that I have no idea how to do. I don't know. What is that? Tweet? Do you tweet? Right? What do? You send out a telegram or something? Right? Whatever that is. Yeah, do that. Speaking of that game, was it intimidating playing with Kelsey and Professor Dungeon Master? Not talking about their gaming chops. I'm, of course, referring to 2 perfect heads of hair. Yes, their hair is fabulous. Both of them. Not rising to the level of intimidating, but certainly fabulous. All right. Dex McHenry, well, there's been enough positive vibes to convince me to sign up as a VIP this evening. You had me at the mention of Moorcock and the Celts. Ha ha! All right. Welcome aboard, Dex. Okay. All right. We're coming to the end of this here. Oh, this is a good one. Salgarililius. I come from the future to say that Broken Empires was an awesome success, but it could have gone bigger if the timing of release wasn't competing with D&D 5.5. That is a great comment. That is really great. And here's why. I was originally terrified of releasing this game anywhere near the release of, we're just going to call it D&D 6. Okay? Terrified. Oh my God, it's going to suck the air out of the other room. That's all anybody's going to talk about. And the answer to that is, yeah, that's true. That's all anybody in the D&D world is going to talk about. But I realized my audience is not the same audience as D&D. Now, there are crossover, of course. There's always crossover. But my primary audience are not 5e players. They might be interested in D&D. They might even buy the products. But that's not really... They're not my super fan. My super fan is a person who plays Harnmaster, Mithras, Chivalry and Sorcery, Burning Wheel, that stuff. The One Ring. That's my super fan. That doesn't mean that they're not also playing D&D, but they get that there's way more games than just D&D. That's probably the biggest thing. The fact is, and it is a sad fact, it is a fact that I've been fighting against on the Sage's Library for a long time. The fact is most D&D players who are new don't even know that there are other games. They are not my audience. They wouldn't know what to do with the Broken Empires. They wouldn't. But people who are aware of other games, they're going to look at this and go, oh, yeah, no, this is a completely different experience than what D&D is doing. Like night and day. So I'm not worried about it. And in fact, I think we might actually wind up benefiting from it because I suspect and I could be totally wrong, but I suspect that there's going to be people when D&D drops in a couple weeks that see what it is and see what they're trying to do with it, and these people are going to be upset. They're going to say, "What? Why are you doing it this way? What? What else is there? Oh, look! There's the Broken Empires." Now, again, I don't think there's going to be a lot of crossover because, again, the people who are playing D&D, they're probably not that interested. But hey, man, if I get 10 people, even 10 people who find my game because of that, awesome. That's 10 more people that get to have a different experience that could change their gameplay or elevate their gameplay or just give them something really great that they never thought was possible. That is why. So I'm not afraid about it. I'm not afraid of it or about it. But great comment, and it's something that I've been struggling with for a long time, up until about a couple months ago. Awesome. All right. James Wood, what are your systems and rules for traps and puzzles? If I want to focus more on the adventure survival and narrative elements than in combat. So a big thing about the game system is that combat is only one way to skin a cat. There are many, many, many ways to overcome an obstacle. Many. So traps are definitely a part of that. There's a skill in the game called locks and traps, which is one way to deal with them, but it depends on the context. Success levels, the success level system, which is what the game engine is called, allows you to do all kinds of things. So you could set up a trap that basically says, and this is largely supported in the book, and it's largely described in the book. You could set up a trap that basically says this is a 10 SL trap, which means that the party has to achieve 10 SLs using whatever skills make sense in that moment to overcome that trap. Maybe that's perception. Maybe it's locks and traps. Maybe it's a type of lore. Maybe it's an athletics roll. Whatever the case is, that'll be up to the context of the situation. But typically in those little micro scenarios, each character can do one thing to contribute to that, right? Kind of like, I guess you'd call it a skill challenge from D&D 4, even though I'm not hugely familiar with it. That's one way to do it. It's only one way to do it. You could do it way more traditionally. The party's walking down the hallway. You know that there's a pit trap. If the party doesn't explicitly say that they're doing something to test for traps, they just fall in the pit, right? That's one way to do it. That's super old school. That's super OSR way to do it, right? So yeah, man, like you can do it however you want. But yes, there's rules in there to help facilitate different approaches, you know? Okay. Ike D says, hey, Sagalarius, who wins the Super Bowl? A year from the future. Slightly taller halfling, will there be a domain game system together with the mass combat? That's something that's not going to be in the main book. It's something that I wanted to put in the main book, but I'm still developing it. And I'm trying to do it in a way that makes it different than what Kevin Crawford does, because his stuff is so good. I'm a really bad marketer because honestly, part of me would say, oh, no. Just go buy his stuff. Just go buy his stuff and use his stuff. That's a terrible marketing decision. So it's much smarter for me to come up with my own that is connected specifically to my own game system. But, you know, I'm stupid sometimes. So I just say, I just go buy Kevin Crawford stuff. But yes, I am developing stuff that is specific for the Broken Empires that will be domain game system. See ya, Black Lodge. Thanks, man. Micro Dude says shattered or badly broken. Ha 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 ha. True. All right. Ike D says, I did VIP too. We'll buy the pricey hard one. You got to autograph it though. Yeah. Weirdly, people want to pay more money for me to deface their books. Don't know why, but that's going to be an option. Just like when I sign autographs for my voiceover work, because I do conventions and stuff, and for like the characters I've played over the years. For those of you who don't actually know me, I'm a professional voice actor. I played Rocket Raccoon and Emperor Palpatine and a bazillion characters over 25 years. But so I sign these autographs, and every time someone gives me a picture of one of my characters and says, will you sign this? I'm like, why would you want me to deface this picture? Why do you want me to destroy this picture? It doesn't make any sense to me. But okay, I'll take your $50. Right, so we will do that. Steel the Warrior says it'll be the perfect timing to catch the eyes of everyone who checks out the new D&D and decides they don't like it and go looking for new alternatives. Yeah, maybe. That may be the case. May be the case. All right. Magnificent Devil says Wizards of the Coast just can't stop stepping on rakes. Yeah, it kind of feels that way, doesn't it? Yikes. All right. All right. Oh, Alex, do you think you will get many people who are new to RPGs as a whole? I I don't know. Maybe. You never know, right? You never know where people are gonna discover RPGs for the first time. Uh, I would say, and I've said this before, that the Broken Empires is not exactly a beginner-friendly game. Like, it does assume you have some background in gaming. It uses terminology that I assume is universal to gamers. So if you're brand new, but then again, maybe not, because it doesn't use the same tropes as something like D&D does. Like, for example, you're not going to see the term armor class in my game. Those of us who have played D&D for years, we just know armor class. Yep, we know what that means. But if you've never played any game, someone says, "What's your AC?" What the hell does that mean? So my game doesn't have as much jargon as those games do, so maybe it's slightly easier. But I don't know. Like when I was a kid, one of the first games I came across was MERPS. And MERPS is not a very beginner-friendly game. And I was really young, like 10 or something, 11 maybe. I don't remember exactly how old I was. Maybe slightly older, but doesn't matter. I was pretty young for it. And yet I figured it out, and I loved it. Were there easier games? Yeah, basic D&D was way easier. But I loved this. I loved the complexity of this. I loved the fact that this game, MERPS, gave me so much more detail when I hit the orc. And I did a critical. I did a C critical on his leg. Now he dropped. He's bleeding 20 hits around. I love that. It's pretty complex stuff for a new gamer. So I don't know. Maybe new gamers will look at this and go, "Oh, this is really cool. I love the fact there's hit locations. I don't even know what that is, but I sure love it." Maybe. But it's not explicit. It's not designed for that. It's not. And I don't hold people's hands. I don't coddle people. The game is what it is. And it's more complex than a lot of games. If you're someone who loves rules light games and one-page rules and stuff, this is not the game for you. You're not going to like it. If you're someone who doesn't like to learn new things, well, this is not the game for you. But if you are, this probably could be the game for you. Okay. JW, yeah, responding to Alex, I was thinking about those lines. Or I was thinking along those lines too. Someone who says, "I heard about this thing called role playing and I want to try it out." Yeah, I'd be curious. I'd love to see what a brand new person would. I'd love to see their face when they open this book, because I don't know. I mean, would it be completely alien? I don't think so. I don't think so. But my perspective's all shot. I've been doing this for 40 years, so. JW, how do we get these newbies to realize other options in D&D? Brother, that has been my siren song forever. That's why I do the Sage's Library on the channel. I want people to know about all the other games out there, man. Vortec, I think the old school TTRPG players are your audience, and they can share that experience with new players. Maybe, but there's a lot of old school players that like the old school mechanics, like the OSR types, right? I had a great interview with Baron Dorop of Dungeon Masterpiece when we were at Gen Con. He hasn't aired that yet. He may be waiting for me to actually tell him to air it. But it was fantastic because he said he's a purely an OSR guy. He likes that stuff. He's really into that stuff. And so he said to me, "What would an OSR lover get out of this game? Why would they play the Broken Empires?" And I'd never been asked that before. And I thought, oh. So I answered the best way I knew how, which was, basically I give levels of detail that you don't get in a rules light game, like a lot of OSR games are. I give you resolution of detail that you don't get, and I do it at not too much of a cost and speed. And I feel that the return on the time invested is well worth it because it helps to immerse you into the situation and see the world through the eyes of the character. And I told him that in my game in a combat, when you rolled a hit, do you hit? These are the things you find out. Do you hit? How well do you hit? What kind of combat maneuvers are possible from your hit? And where do you hit? What's the quality of the wound? It blew his mind. He was like, "You can tell all that from one roll?" I'm like, yeah. You don't have to roll to hit and then roll damage. I've always hated that, by the way. I've always hated that the fact that damage was totally irrespective of the quality of the hit drives me nuts. But my game doesn't do that. My game, the damage is entirely based on the quality of the hit, which of course is mitigated by the quality of the defense. Anyway, so yeah, it kind of blew his mind a little bit with that. And I love that because it kind of gave me hope that some of the OSR people might actually like this, although I'm not counting on it. Because one of the things that the OSR people love, and I'm sure there's some of you out there, and this is also what Baron told me, which I'd never thought of before. He said the reason why OSR is so attractive to people, it's not just the fact that the rules are easy to get into, but it's also because all of these OSR D&D clones, basically, are so similar that you can pick and choose between the various products for anything. So if I'm running, I don't know, Shadow Dark, I can easily use the Keep on the Borderlands from basic D&D. Or if I'm using Old School Essentials, I can easily run a game from Axe, or whatever, right? Like they're all so similar because they all share that common DNA. So I don't have that. The common DNA that my game has is going to be closer to something like Mithras, RuneQuest, Hardmaster, that kind of stuff. But, you could, well, even that, I was going to say you could borrow like monsters from Mithras and use in my game. You could, but it would take quite a lot of conversion. But I'm sure somebody out there would probably do it. That's what happens. People do that stuff. Okay, Ricardo, they dropped half-elves and half-orcs in D&D 2024. So you better advertise them in big, bold letters to get a few players on your side. That's actually a really good idea. I can't believe they did that. Half-orcs? That was the first... Well, it wasn't the first. It was the second character I ever played. Makansar, the half-orc. With his halfling partner, Barf. Yeah, well, what do you want? I was 8. Getting rid of half-elves and half-orcs? Sorry, Watsy, that's just stupid. Yes, you could play half-orcs in my game. Oh, yeah, baby. And while you can't play half-elves, you can play something called the Bolg Fear. What are those? You'll have to tune in next time to find out. Mark Pierce, I just signed up for the VIP launch. Yay, welcome. Welcome, Mark. So excited to see how this turns out. Really appreciate the thought you put into your mechanics and gameplay. You can tell the experience and love you put into it. Thank you, my friend. I do. I put a lot of time into it, and I put a lot of heart into it because it's, like I said, I want to create something that is authentic. And I think that the more authentic it is, the more people are going to like it. And there's going to be people that don't, right? Like, mechanics are totally subjective. Games are subjective. There's going to be people that just don't like it. And that's cool. That's fine. You can't please everybody, certainly with a game. So, but thanks for joining us. That's awesome. Does your game have any rules for muskets and flintlock pistols? No, because in the Broken Empires, they haven't figured out gunpowder for small guns yet. They've figured out for cannon. You do see cannon, like the Tikal Dondelise, the Pirates of the Serpent Teeth, they have big cannons, but no one's actually put it together that maybe we can do this in a small thing yet. Will that happen in the future? Who can say? The technological evolution of the Broken Empires is very different from our own world. Tang Pao says, I love MERPs, and I think I was 10 when I ran across it the first time too. Yeah. It's weird. It's really not a friendly game for little kids. And yet I loved it and I made it work. Played it completely wrong, but who cares? It was awesome. Leon Harvey, for future game edition supplements, have you thought of releasing zines to cover extra rules? Haven't thought about it, but now that you mention it, maybe it's a cool idea. I'll talk to Kelsey about that. That's her thing, right? Like all the all the zines she releases. It's a good idea. Magnificent Devil. A lot of OSR players are extremely change adverse and have an allergic reaction to anything too far outside what they already know. Yep, that is 100% true. People like what they like, and a lot of the times they don't want to try something different. That's fine. That's human nature. It's not my nature. It's not the nature of the friends that I have, but it's very common. You're totally right. And that's okay. Like I said, either people are going to take a chance on this and try it, or they're not. And that's okay. As long as enough people do that the project funds, I'll be happy. God of Moxie says, I have Axe, which is Adventure Conqueror King, the Adventure Conqueror King system, for D&D vibes, so I'm really glad to have more cool D100 systems. Yeah, well, there's no lack of D&D clones. There is no lack of D&D games. No lack of them. And I get it. I understand why. They're easy to pick up, easy to get into. They share a bunch of tropes that people commonly understand. There's not as many simulation-type games, and there's no sim-light games. The Broken Empires is the first of its kind. So, yeah, that's cool. Jason Cross. Oh, hooray. I love this. I'm new to tabletop role-playing games and found this channel looking to learn how to GM. I've been running 5e because that's what my friends want to play, but I really can't wait for the Broken Empires to drop and learn another system. You cannot know how happy that makes me to hear that, Jason. That is so awesome. There's nothing inherently wrong with 5e. But if you can show your friends a whole new world. Uh-oh, copyright strike. If you can show your friends that there is a whole universe of games out there, doesn't have to be mine, man, then, brains will explode with possibilities. I'm so excited for you. That's so great. So great to hear. Oh, yes, awesome. All right. Michael Young, any chance of applying your system to sci-fi? Not in this book. I don't see why not. The basic game could easily be ported to a sci-fi thing. You'd have to have new rules for like guns and starships and stuff like that, but wouldn't be hard to do. In fact, I would use my naval combat rules and probably just apply them to starship combat. And guns are just basically ranged weapons with special abilities that they do. So yeah, I don't see a problem at all. You know, you would take weave magic and just make a version that's more appropriate to a sci-fi setting somehow. Wouldn't be that hard. So it could be. I'm not going to do it because it's a fantasy game, but it could be done. Andreas Valentine, airships with pirate cannons? No, regular pirate ships with cannons. Although there are a type of airships, but they belong exclusively to the dwarves. They are giant stone ships that act as gargantuan cities, because that is where the dwarves live ever since the Great Diaspora, when their civilization suffered the cataclysm and caused the dwarves to flee Mountain Holm. And now they exist solely in these independent flying stone, gargantuan flying cities, basically, that are ships. But none of the dwarves know how they work. The secrets to their production, the secrets to their upkeep are lost to them. So they have sky priests, these dwarven sky priests, whose job it is to intone the correct rites and make the holy prayers and anoint the various gears with the holy unguents and oils so that the sky ship will continue to float and travel, but they have no idea why. So eventually the sky ships are going to degrade and fall to Earth, and nobody can stop it. Or can they? So yeah, there's that. Ike D. Does the Broken Empires have Thaco? Okay, you gotta go. Go! Oh. Salgarelius, that tribe of swamp lizard people living near the temple on Season 3, are they lawful evil? They are not, because there's no alignments in this game. In fact, they are possibly a stretch goal PC race. Possibly. Okay, Taffer's Tower says, Magnificent Devil, you're not wrong about old school players being set in their ways. But you can say that about any group of RPG players, 5e players for sure. That is true. That's also true. Oh, Dom, when does the Broken Empire series of miniatures come out? Well, funny you say that. We are looking at providing a very limited run of miniatures of certain characters in the show. So that's a thing. We'll see. We'll see if it comes. Probably stretch goal again. We'll see if we can afford to do it. Then great. But if we can't, we're not gonna, because that can be something. JW, I played AD&D 2nd edition for years, and so many things about the game mechanics annoyed me. I'm glad there's such a wide universe of alternatives. Yeah, me too. I gave up on AD&D back in the mid '80s when I discovered literally everything else. AD&D was great, man. We had so many great campaigns in AD&D, so I will never disparage it. But it served its purpose for me, and I bumped up against its limitations real quick. So, but there's a huge universe of alternatives. Okay. Greek solo RPG. Any chance of player-facing roles for the solo part of the Broken Empires? Yeah. I don't know what that chance is, but there's a chance. Like I said, the people I'll be working with for the solo rules, we're going to be looking at all that stuff. Because I have a feeling, in order to make this game truly fun to solo play, some fairly significant shifts in the core engine would have to be made. But I don't want to do that myself. Believe it or not, I am not an expert in solo games. I know, hard to believe, right? My whole channel's about solo games, or most of my channel's about solo games. But I'm not an expert when it comes to that stuff. Remember, my solo gaming is I take a game I want to play, and I take the Mythic GM emulator, and I put those together. You can do that with the Broken Empires too, but it's more complex. Right now, if you just do exactly what I do with the Broken Empires on the show and just use the emulator, it's tough. It's tough. Not going to lie to you, it's tough. It's the same reason I would never solo Harnmaster. I love Harnmaster, but I would never do it solo because it's too hard. There's too many moving parts. There's too much going on. So I would never recommend the Broken Empires as it stands now as a solo experience. That's why we're doing these solo tools, to try and make it easier. And there's a way to do it. Of course there is. There's many ways to do it. But I just don't want to do it alone. I want help from the people that I've already asked to come on board, and I think you're going to be very, very excited when you find out who they are. All right. Burke, are you still sticking to zones in the Broken Empire? Fate has it is not very popular. I would say that Fate is not very popular with me. The zones are. I like zones. They work really well, and they work really well with this particular combat system. I have nothing against hex or grid-based combat. Love it. Just zones work better for what I'm doing in this game. So, yes, I am sticking to it. And if you're a person that really loves your hex-based or grid-based combat, it's pretty easy to adjust. It's pretty easy. Just give everybody a move of 10 or 5 or whatever, or everybody can move 10 feet and attack, and away you go. There was no explicit rules for that kind of that kind of movement in Warhammer Fantasy First Edition. So that's what we did. We said, you just move 10 feet and attack. Solved it. Boom. You could do that in Fate, too, if you really wanted to, but I don't know why I'd want to. I am not a huge fan of Fate. There's things about Fate that I love, but more about it that bug me. I've never done a Sage's Library on it, but I will eventually. It may be the first largely negative Sage's Library I do. Because Fate, it does what it does well. It's just the things that it does are not things that I feel I need as a gamer. All right. Dwayne Gardner. G'day, Trevor. Oh, g'day. I'm going to imagine you're from down under. G'day, Trevor. Am able to catch a bit of the stream while I work. With the amount of games you've played, was there mechanics you chose to not include in the game? Yeah. Yeah, there were. A great example of that is if you watch Season 4. In Episode 1, I'm using a phase-based initiative system. But if you watch Season 9, you realize, there's no more phase-based. It's more traditional initiative system, although it's not quite traditional. It's got its own thing, which I really love. I love my initiative system. So that's an example of something that I chose not to pursue because I've explained this before, but I have nothing against phase systems. I quite love them. Like Against the Dark Master is a phase system. I really dig it. It gives a really different feel, and it organizes things very differently. It's just for me with the rest of this system, it just didn't feel right. It just didn't feel right. So I went, you know what? I'm going to go with something more. And as soon as I made that choice, everything just felt easier. So, like I said, every time I make a choice as a designer, I have to go where the fun is for me, which is subjective, right? So, but yeah, there was lots of stuff that I can't make work. Lots of stuff I can't make work. And that's okay, you know? There's no such thing as a perfect system, so you do your best. All right. Sal Garelius, I can't get your name right. Not having alignment will really piss off some people. What's the sell there? Gray area better for storytelling. I think the only people that it would piss off are D&D players, and they're really not my market. None of the games I play have alignment, except D&D. None of the games have alignment. I mean, Warhammer had a kind of alignment, but it wasn't the same thing. If anything, the Warhammer alignment system is way better because it's way more in line with the setting of the game. Law versus chaos. But other than that, alignment is not a thing. I haven't used alignment since like 1985, so it's not even a thing. If it really pisses people off, that's a them problem, not a me problem. Don't really care. If you're pissed off at something, grow up, get over it. Don't be a baby. Okay, Burke. Yeah, you already answered that question. Oh, yeah, and the alignment thing. Magnificent Devil says alignments and what exactly they mean have probably caused more arguments at the table than any other aspect of any game ever. That's true. They're fun alignments, but they can cause issues. I think alignments are great for games where you're really not taking things too seriously, like a game like original D&D was, right? Where it's about dungeon crawling. It's about getting in there. You want a general idea of the character's morality. That's what the alignment gives you. No problem. But if you're playing a game that is more about the intricacies of a character, of a person, which is what the Broken Empires is doing, alignments are not a useful tool because they have a lot of built-in assumptions about them that actually get in the way of you being able to effectively play a legitimate, breathing, living, feeling character. So I would never use them for a game like this. Although we all played that game. I'm sure some of you did this too. I'm sure some of you did this. Where you sit around a buddy's basement and you tell each other what alignments you think you all are in real life. I got lawful evil. Lawful evil, can you believe it? I mean, maybe when I was 17, I was a little evil, but no, lawful good, baby. Well, maybe more chaotic good. Whatever. All right. Dead Marsh, I'm late to the party. Will there be any procedural dungeon crawling? If you want, as I said at the beginning of this, and I know you're late, but as I said at the beginning of this thing, if you want to use the game as a dungeon crawler, you can, although expect a lot of dead and maimed characters. Yeah. The dungeons in the Broken Empires tend to be very limited, explainable areas in the world. Like, it's very unusual that some wizard would make some crazy multi-level dungeon and stock it with monsters for reasons. No, a dungeon is going to be more like a ruined temple, an abandoned fort, a cave system in the mountains, things that have purpose in the world, and the inhabitants there are there for a reason. And if there are traps, those traps are there to protect something specific. If there's a treasure, like a weapon, and there is a monster, like, I don't know, a big ogre or something, a big troll, who can use that weapon, you can be damn sure that troll is going to use that weapon on you. It's not going to just sit there in some chest waiting for you to kill the troll and take it. No, if he knows that's there, he's going to use it on you. So dungeon crawling in the D&D sense is not recommended for this game because there'd be too many dead characters. Frankly. If you really are into dungeon crawls, there's way better games to do it. One of them's called D&D. Okay. Oh, Ike D. Twilight 2000 4th edition has zones and hexes. They can both work in the same system. Yep, they sure do. I love that game. I ran a great campaign. Was in a great campaign. Love it. Love it. Love that game. Love the game. All right. Dwayne's from Melbourne. Cool. I quite loved Melbourne when I was there a number of years ago. Dungeon crawling, broadly speaking, like in Forbidden Lands. Yeah. Well, I think what I just said sort of covers that, right? There is dungeon crawling, in which case it's some sort of complex you find that has a purpose, and the inhabitants are there for a reason, and, there could be mysteries about it, which you can discover, and all that kind of stuff. All right. Bertie Ho. What a lawful evil thing to say. Salgarelius, I keep coming back to you because you have some interesting things to say here. From what I saw so far, armor feels great to have in the Broken Empires and dangerous to face against. Characters are fragile and armor is necessary. Yes. No question. Armor saves lives. Yep. Just like in life. Armor was worn for a reason, because it saves your life. That's true. Okay. All right. Cybrim, how do you build a region from scratch? Well, there's a broad question. That is the stuff of years of experience to answer that one. But it is now, oh my God, how long have we been at this? A long time. Oh my God, 2 hours. Oh, no. This is over. 2 hours is long enough. Thanks, guys. Thank you, all of you, for your questions and your comments. This was really, really great. Really cool questions in here and things that I haven't thought of before. So that's awesome. Thank you so much for stimulating my brain pen. So I'm going to go, and we'll do this again soon. But I got to shoot episode 10. I'm hoping to do that this week. But I'm also, designing a game and prepping for Kickstarter. So there's a lot going on. But I don't want to leave you guys hanging too much if you're following the show. Vale's in a very interesting place right now. If you haven't caught up, make sure you do. Make sure you check out Season 4, Episode 9. Ho-ho! Quite the cliffhanger. We're going to see what happens to her. But in the meantime, thanks, everybody. I'm going to stop streaming now and hope that it actually does stop instead of me saying bye and then sitting here for 5 minutes trying to find the stop button. Okay.